There is no doubt if somebody says, life is a mystery. Yes, it definitely is. We just don't know what lies ahead and what follows after that. We all want our lives to be big, filled with everything that we ever wished for. To begin with, a dream house is the first thing that we all want, right? Even this guy, about whom this story is, bought this beautiful dream house to start his new life with his family. One of the most important thing from the things we want list, he managed to strike it off. But things didn't turn out to be the way he wanted. Soon, everything started to fall apart when the hidden secrets of his house started to surface, which slowly started to crawl towards him only to take him into the darkness from which he tried running from. Fortunately, he was able to outrun the darkness which was trying hard to catch him, but even a small ray of light could make the darkness go away. Let's see what happened to him when he bought his dream house.
Before we begin, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe to our channel, click the notification bell to be inspired by these heartwarming stories every day.
Christopher wasn't able to control his excitement he was getting from his new big house that has everything he ever wanted. The house was surrounded by enough greenery that was giving it the perfect house look if viewed from the distance. As he was going through his new property to have a proper look on which he has spent so much money, Christopher was welcomed by something unbelievable. Astonished by the discovery, he investigated it further only to find himself in the middle of a bog that kept sinking him inside. His new house soon became his worst nightmare, which made him question his own beliefs. He wanted to run away from the house and never return back. But what made him so terrified that he was ready to abandon his dream house? The property which Christopher Wanless bought covered the size of 16.5 hectares of woodland fields, and was lucky to find this great big house in such a beautiful place. Everything was going according to the plan which was scripted by destiny. Little he knew the destiny has another plan for him, and soon he would be the one discovering the mystery of the house that was hidden somewhere in this big area which he alone would be able to find. He was destined to do so. One day, Christopher decided to inspect his new house and the area which surrounded it. It seemed as the fall season was approaching. The trees were trying their best to maintain their beauty, but the season was making it difficult. Wandering in the area, Christopher's feet took him where he found something that froze time at that moment. What did he see? Christopher kept staring at that weird thing from distance, and it was hard for him to jump to the conclusion about that thing's identity. Is that an old tree? He thought to himself. He went closer to have a better look at that mysterious thing only to fall deeper into the mystery. He was wrong about the tree he thought it was. Excited, he didn't even realize where his feet were taking him. Suddenly, he fell into a 3-foot hole that was covered with all the fallen leaves from the trees. Stunned, he got back on his feet covered in mud and leaves. He cleaned himself and he saw something in front of him. What's that? He thought to himself. It's not possible, it can't be, he kept telling to himself, because he saw something which was entirely unexpected to him. He was actually standing in front of a mine, and that too a mine in his own property of which he wasn't told about. The mine was old and seemed to be an abandoned one. Should he go inside to take a look? He shouldn't have entered the mine, but eventually, he did, only to discover something that was hiding inside it. It was a call from destiny. Being an old mine, it was covered with which seemed like moss, but it was extremely too dark to be sure if that was moss or something else. According to Christopher, who recalls the moment, when we bought the house, nobody ever told us about the fact that the estate had a lot of mines on it. We just sort of stumbled upon the gold mine one day and that was it. When I first saw it, I was so excited that I almost fell over myself. The only thing that I could think about was Indiana Jones and underground railroads. He was very much intrigued by the sight and decided to go check it out. He shouldn't have. He was very excited to explore the mine, which he had no idea was even there in his property. He rushed back to his house to gather a flashlight so that he can fully examine the mystery that was deep inside the mine. Little he knew his life was about to change forever. This decision would soon be the worst he has ever made in his entire life. Christopher was standing in front of the mine, pointing the flashlight on the entrance of the mine. He wasn't completely inside but could see some sparkly objects on the walls of the mine. Gold? Or something else? He found out really soon. The old walls seemed like they could fall down any moment top of him. Cautiously, he made his way into the mine. His footsteps echoed, which made him walk really slow because of all the noise, which was made him really terrified. All he had was a flashlight, for which he brought some spare batteries in case he stayed longer inside the mine. Christopher kept his distance from the wall because of the strange sparkly thing that shined every time he moved his flashlight towards them. He recalls, what if this was gold? But the thought of gold soon vanished from his mind and never came back after what he saw in the mine that totally changed his motive of entering the mine. The temperature was sure cold inside the mine. He could tell because of all the light shivering he felt every time a breeze passed by him, giving him chills all over his body. The sweat kept flowing behind his ears all the way back to his lower back. Below his feet, the path was filled with 4-inch deep water which wasn't still but flowing. The water must have a source and the exit point. But where? But that wasn't his concern at that moment. His flashlight was pointing towards the water flow, which he slowly moved upwards to see where it was going, and it was then he saw the end of the tunnel. He saw some strange lights at the end. What could it be? He shouldn't have moved further. He was making the biggest mistake of his life. The deeper he went inside the mine, the darker it became. The place was like a dark space with no air movements, nothing. All it was just a black blank dark space. Holding his flashlight and moving it in every direction, it looked like he was a Jedi from Star Wars. The sudden noise of machinery and old metals singing together alarmed his heart. Holding his flashlight in the direction of the noise, he heard something else which wasn't clear to him because of the water drops falling into the water and echoing inside the mine. "Who's there?" he shouted, unable to hold his breath. But it was his own voice that came back to him. He held the flashlight with more strength, in no mood to drop it, moved his feet towards the darkness. Only things that accompanied him on his adventure: a small flashlight, flowing water, dust, and darkness. Though there was a yellow-colored ventilation installed inside the mine, he could feel that it wasn't playing its part properly. Something cold touched his back of the neck near his ear. Startled by the touch, he saw few chains hanging downwards. Even when there were no movements of air, these chains were waving back at him. Christopher was feeling really weird, and he could feel some unusual feeling in his stomach. He didn't even realize, but his feet were moving backward as if something was warning him to stay away from this darkness. He could sense some presence, but who was it? No idea of what time it was and what's happening outside. He was already 15 feet inside the mine. He looked back. He could see a light at the entrance, but the moment he saw at the front, the darkness was ready to welcome him with open arms. Soon his claustrophobia took over him when one of the chains started to swing rapidly in front of him. He stood there for a moment in shock, and his eyeballs kept staring the chain and moved them in the direction the chain moved. He felt like a person being hypnotized by the darkness. He could feel his heart trying to come out of his chest. He ran back to the light and didn't see behind for one moment. He needed to tell someone about it, but who? Christopher didn't stop for 1 second until he reached the entrance of his house. His lungs begged for fresh air, as they have already given everything they held. Without wasting any time, he called his real estate agent. When we went to ask about the place, we were finally told that the estate had actually been home to quite a lot of mining sites. A lot of mining was done in these hills at the turn of the century, and there are a lot of little mines that are scattered across the hills, Christopher explained. He told the agent about everything he experienced back in the old mine. The agent assured him that he was sending someone right away to his place. Christopher was relieved to hear that. His body, which was tightened because of the fear, started to get loose again. "This cannot be happening," Christopher shouted, and the whole house was alarmed. Christopher thought he was far away from the terror which he left behind the tunnel, but he was wrong. He was in the kitchen, standing beside the phone he used a moment ago to call the agent. The lights started to glimmer. The flickering kept going for a couple of minutes, and then everything was dark. Confused, he searched for the switchboard of the kitchen and began turning the switches off and on. With no success, he stood there. He felt a sudden blow of breeze that touched his sweaty neck. He took out the flashlight from his pocket and started waving it in confusion in the kitchen. He calmed himself down, pointed the flashlight towards the thermostat. To his surprise, the temperature was down, making his breath cold, filled with fog when he blew it out. It was very strange about the temperature falling like this. It could be because of the fuse circuit, he thought. Christopher went to the basement where the circuit board of the house was to check the fault if there was any. Shocked to see that everything was fine and there was no sign of fuse getting blown. What the hell is happening? He thought. He searched for some faulty wirings while he tried switching the switches on and off again and again. It was a faulty wiring, and he could see his shoulders getting light, and with a sigh, he moved upstairs. He thought the bell rang, and indeed somebody was on the gate. Who could it be? Christopher attended the gate. It was Mr. Rudall, who was sent by Christopher's real estate agent. He seemed very excited about the old mine and the mysterious stuff on the wall. Without any delay, they moved towards the old mine. Christopher warned him to watch his steps because it would be dark inside and they had only one flashlight. Christopher was in front, leading Mr. Rudall into the land of darkness. Mr. Rudall could see that he wasn't lying about the sparkly stuff that was there on the wall of the mine. Excitement flowing inside Rudall's body, he felt something strange passing by him. Terrified and struggling for air, he told something to Christopher. A warning to stay away from the mine. Stay away? Christopher asked. He was confused to see Mr. Rudall like this. What did just happen? Rudall told something hair-raising to Christopher. The mine was indeed a gold mine. All these sparkly things are none other than gold which hasn't been explored by the workers and left abandoned. Who was so dumb to leave a gold mine abandoned? Rudall continued to tell him about the gossip which follows behind the miners and mine. Rudall was surprised to see that there was a gold mine in this area of which he never heard of. The only question that was in front of them was, what happened here that left the gold untouched for centuries? Christopher was determined to go at the bottom of it, but soon he found out that he should have left the mine alone. What is that he found out about the mine? Christopher gathered all of his strength to go deeper into the tunnel and find out the truth behind this mysterious mine that managed to stay untouched for years. Mr. Rudall didn't accompany him and went back, leaving Christopher alone in the mine. Even that didn't stop him to investigate further. He was here before, but the feeling of terror felt new to him. Holding his flashlight tighter with baby steps, he started walking towards the everlasting darkness. Last time he only reached 150 feet deep into the mine, but this time he was determined to reach the end of the mine. He was 600 feet deep and finally saw the origin of the water that flowed inside the mine. Focusing the light, he saw a door at the end of the wall. He gulped his saliva and his nervousness began biting his lips. Should he go in there? Before opening the door with his hands, he knocked at the door. First came the small light knock, and with no answer to be heard, he knocked again with a little strength this time, and even then there was no response. How stupid of him to think that somebody was behind that door. Or was he right? The atmosphere inside the mine was nothing compared to the outside. It was freezing inside. The room was something else entirely that was giving him chills through his spine. His mind was telling him to move out of the room, but his eyes kept searching for some clue before he went out. It was then the flashlight highlighted some old broken furniture in the room. Some were even partially burnt. Was somebody here? He could sense his lungs getting tighter with some kind of pressure he wasn't aware of. Maybe lack of oxygen, he thought. But he wasn't feeling that way a minute ago, then why this sudden change in the pressure? Something was off about the room, and soon he found out everything. Along with the furniture, there was a bed whose springs were coming out from different places. Soon he found that somebody lived here before and left the room, leaving behind all his stuff. But why? The walls weren't painted and you could see bricks on the walls. The flashlight caught a glimpse of a secret hideaway. Christopher couldn't link a hideaway inside a secret room, that too inside a mine. The curiosity made him move towards the hideaway, and he went inside it holding his flashlight in his mouth, but it was empty. Disappointed, he turned back towards the room, and then he saw something that was written on the brick wall. He was completely shocked. The flashlight fell from his hand and it was all dark in front of his eyes. He picked up the flashlight to read it again. What was written on the wall that shook him to the core? Christopher pointed the flashlight on another side of the walls, surprised by the white scratched. He moved closer, and it seemed like these 4 white vertical lines were handmade. Somebody carved them out with the fingers. But why 4 vertical lines? He thought. Who was living here? As he investigated more, he found something else that scared the hell out of him. The text which he saw on one of the walls were small and unreadable, but while he was looking for clues, he found a text written all over it, and that too in bold capital letters. He took out his camera from the pocket and took some pictures of it for later investigation. Stunned, he was sure he heard some noise. His heart beating even faster, he felt a blow of chilly breeze on the back of his neck. He turned in shock, and then he felt the cold air again from the other side. Waving his flashlight in surprise, he couldn't see anyone inside. He stood there in shock, and terror almost covered his whole body. He heard the noise that came from the left side, then from the right, and then from the back. He was circling in the room to search for the origin of the noise. This time the noise was even louder and fast. It seemed like it was approaching, and when it was almost near his face, he ran. Christopher exited the hideaway, then the room, and ran towards the light at the entrance of the mine. The flashlight waving up and down because of his hands moving in that sequence while he was running for his life. He wanted to stop to inhale some air before he ran further, but his feet seemed to have their own mind, and it didn't stop even if he wanted to. He was running for his life to leave the darkness behind. With a sudden fall, he had no idea what was coming next. He was almost at the entrance, and he jumped when he couldn't run further, landing outside the mine. Holding his chest tightly and breathing heavily, he didn't get up and stayed in that position for several minutes. It's no gold mine, he was talking to himself. He stood up and ran toward his house. He wanted to know about the house and this gold mine before he makes his next decision. The moment he entered his house, he didn't stop to call the agent, telling him all about the mine. He straight away went to his study and made sure he locked the door behind him. Holding the table and leaning towards it, he could still feel that cold breeze on his skin. Even now the noise echoed inside his head. "Am I going crazy?" he asked, looking at the mirror in front of him. Someone was there, he was sure of it. That thing was just inches away when he ran for his life. He needed some answers. He sat in front of his computer and typed, "Haunted Mine." The first line he read on the first link of the search engine, it was, "If you want to get rid of the paranormal activity in the mine and subsequently, in your life, you have to face it." The idea of going back again inside the mine and then in that creepy room made him really uncomfortable. But he had no choice but to have some answers. And there was only one way to solve this mystery and look for the answers he was seeking. Christopher was busy thinking about what should be his next step. Then he heard these strange knocks on his study room door. The 3 knocks which he heard were all in pairs of 3. Knock, knock, knock. It happened 3 times. His eyes got wider as he stood from the table. He thought the noise came from the door but was surprised to see that the noise came from the camera, of which he was sure of switching it off. The camera was on, but then something he saw in the camera. He picked the camera, remembered that he clicked some photographs of the text. But there was not even a single picture in the SD card. They all were mysteriously deleted. Shocked and terrified, the camera slipped through his sweaty hands, landed on the floor. Back to his sense, he picked it up and went out of the room. It is now or never. It was time he faced whatever that thing was. Christopher was heading towards the haunted mine in search for answers. He was again welcomed by the darkness and he moved further. This was his 3rd time entering the tunnel, but the feeling was always new. He didn't rush and slowly approached towards the end of the tunnel. What was that? Sudden cold air pressure hit his face, which stopped him in the middle. The metal chain started to swing again, and this time the metal noises were much louder than before. Has he made a terrible mistake coming back in the mine? He found out soon. He started walking again in the direction of the room. It seemed like somebody was trying to stop him, as the metal noises now started to echo even further and harshly, hurting his ears. Even when he put his hands on his ears, the noise was audible. Pressuring his hands to stop the noise, his head started to ache. His face red, saliva coming out from the side of the mouth and his teeth hurting each other, he sat on the watery floor. With the splash from his knees, the noise wasn't there anymore. He kept looking downwards. The moment he lifts his head to see in the front, he saw it. The water, which was slowly moving in his direction, was now looking thicker. He stood up only to get even more surprised. There was a big wave that was coming towards him in speed. He couldn't believe his eyes that such a big wave from this little water is on his way towards him. He rubbed his eyes, slapped his face, hoping all of this to be a bad dream, but even the pinch didn't wake him up from this reality. Is my mind playing games with me? He asked himself. Turning back, and like deja vu, he started running towards the entrance. He wasn't ready to face this force which was in there. He left the mine and the only thing which he could see was his big house. He was out of the mine now, but curiously turned back to see if the water was still chasing him, but there wasn't a single drop of water. Confused and struggling for air, he decided to leave the place and ran towards his house. This 3rd experience was something else entirely, and calling a person who deals with such kind of paranormal activities was the only option left with Christopher. It was dark now and he could see his house. The kitchen's light was on. Did he leave them on? Because the last time the power went due to faulty wires. Is someone in his house? Cautiously he entered his house, only to be sure if somebody was in there to welcome him. There was no one, and it must be him who has left the lights on. He kept hoping all of this to be a bad dream, because whatever happened was unbelievable. He simply just can't explain all that has happened today in the mine. He sat in front of the computer and began searching about the paranormal activities in gold mines, and suddenly the computer screen went black, and this was just a start. Christopher could see his own face on the black computer screen. He looked tired, as if he hasn't slept for days. He put his hands on his face and could feel the warmth from his palms. Alarmed by the event, something pulled him like a magnet pulls a metal. He was lying on the floor, and it was then he ran for his life out of this house too now. While moving out, he picked his car keys and drove like there was no tomorrow. He drove his car to the nearest market and parked it in front of the first cafe he saw. He ordered a double espresso, of which he was in dire need. He took out his phone, was already on low battery, but without wasting any time he searched "paranormal investigator" near my location. He drank his espresso and left the bill on the table and started his GPS to reach to the nearest paranormal investigator he searched for. The location wasn't that far and his phone almost died, and he saw a purple board on which tarot readings were written. He wanted to forget everything that has happened to him, but without answers, he won't be able to move on. He should know what was he dealing with. He entered the house of the tarot card reader and could smell the incense stick burning in the room. Confused, he sat on the nearest chair and saw a woman coming out of another room. She was wearing red and purple colored dress. Without saying a word, she held Christopher's hand and started chanting something. This chanting looked familiar to him as he has heard it before. Shocked, he remembered that this is the same noise he heard in the mine, but this time it was melodious. What the hell? This woman wasn't ready to leave his hand and kept holding it. She was singing the song on a loop, which made Christopher really uncomfortable and terrified. He stood up and ran out of woman's house towards his car. He started his car, made sure he won't stop until he felt little safe. The tarot card reader kept shouting to stop him as if she knew what was going on. But Christopher was really terrified by the song that kept echoing inside his head like a mantra. He couldn't hear the woman calling out his name. The song made him lose his hearing sense, and all he could see was his car with only one motive: get the hell out of here before anything else happens to him. The woman saw Christopher leave in his car while she sang the same song, which shocked him just a couple of minutes ago. It is said that he went to his mother's house after the incident and sold his house. There was no sign of Christopher's whereabouts, and it was his mother who took the responsibility of the house, who made sure that the house is sold as soon as possible. Even his mother didn't tell anyone about Christopher. But what happened to him? Whatever happened to Christopher that day might have left a very deep scar in his heart. Naturally, he would have wanted to leave everything behind and move forward in his life. We think he might have left the city to leave everything behind. Whatever happened to Christopher that day, he saw the worst nightmare of his life, and leaving the city for that is pretty much justified. What do you think? There are some questions that are still left unanswered. Did he really felt something that day? Or was it all in his head? If Christopher's mother sold the house, did the other owners had the same experience? A hidden mine inside the property that nobody knew of. A secret room which had text, "Forever," written on the wall. Who did that? We don't know if anybody ever again entered that mine, but whatever that thing was, it should be checked. If that mine is really haunted, then people should be aware of that so that no one ever goes through the nightmare Christopher did.